What is up, everyone? Welcome to the show, episode 1 of the Gojira, or Gojira podcast, if you hail from the lands where the band is from, France. So, where to begin with this band, honestly? If you are familiar with my work on the Mastodon podcast and the Sword podcast, you, I suppose, should have a sense of how this, this endeavor is going to sort of play out over the years. It's been sort of long in the making. There's a post actually on the Instagram where you can actually read a bit more about my reasoning behind signal boosting the band in this way, and creating a nice chronicle of literally whenever they just have nothing else to do that day kind of chats with the band themselves. Also, this is my mobile creating studio on my way to work. I'm in Australia here in Canberra, and it's this government admin stuff that I do, which is great, pays the bills. But for the rest, my main thing is art that I do, the patterns that you can see, all based on the concept in physics and science called morphogenesis, which is the manner in which nature creates all of her different patterns across different visual contexts. So it's the fundamental all-connecting electricity, bioelectricity rather, that makes it so that, the capillaries in your eyes resemble branches in lightning as well, the way that everything arcs out in that sort of same way. It's almost as though they're following the same ley lines, predetermined pathways along which, like all forms of nature and creativity take shape. So that's kind of my realm within sort of that primary outlet of creativity is the ever-shaping, which is just my name for it really within what I do, which is the second thing. Another component, the second of the three, which is the quantum myth. I in a similar way to the band, who are able to kind of appeal to all different cultures across the world. There's an element of universality to, for example, Mario's art. There's depictions of very basic, timeless, you could almost say prehistoric figures and silhouettes. Something that every culture had some form of prehistory to it. And, the cave paintings and such, which is definitely what Mario's art evokes. And so that's my thing with the quantum myth, is I just Venn diagram all of world mythology onto itself and see what resonates in particular with me. And it's just this storytelling outlet for that is just like with Joseph Campbell made his, and Jung as well made his studies about these common motifs of the human experience, and whatever kind of, I suppose, like parables or whatever, I kind of shape that way, storytelling wise. That's what I do there. And then the third component of what I do is the podcasts, which is across it's coming in close to around 300 or so outlets, including the Sleep podcast, Cradle of Filth. We just recorded the first one of that one. The primary ones where I've had the most conversations with the creators is the Mastodon podcast with Richie Beckett and Skinner last year, and I think the year before that actually. I think I spoke with Skinner in 2019. And one thing also with the Gojira podcast is we know the band fairly well, but what will be great is at some point to speak with Gabrielle via Zoom, talk about her sort of supporting work to the band and other artists, post artists especially. I spoke with Paul Schipper, who did some art for Star Wars and Indiana Jones and stuff. There's actually a wonderful cross-section between poster artists and album artists. I have the Behemoth, who is almost like a sister band in some ways. They have an interesting kinship, Nergal and Joe, that they've toured together and they sort of have each other's backs, even though they have pretty wildly different, I suppose, palettes, really. They have some common heaviness aspects to them, but yeah, I would say that there's a kinship there whilst being in separate worlds, which is really lovely, and that is sort of kind of weirdly timely relevant to these times, which I love the rumored title of the record coming up, Fortitude. The excellent Instagram account, Gojira Music Aux, or Aux, or depending on how you pronounce it. I commented recently on one of their posts just expressing my gratitude to all the work that they do for the Gojira community. So shout out to them, and I'll be putting links to all these wonderful outlets you can go to and immerse yourself into that Gojira-verse. But anyway, so we've gone into a couple of different tangents here, and maybe that's also a little bit of a teaser of the kind of vibe, and if you of the show, yeah. And if you go and listen to the Richie chat, we actually ended up almost speaking for about 3 hours, because it's just, before we are musicians, before we're any of these public figures, we are human, and there is often, strangely still, persistently in entertainment and art, a tendency to narrow the conversation just to the immediately obvious, like, what was it like recording this record, blah blah blah. Rather, I think, the first well, if we're going to be super, maybe even quasi-esoteric about it, before we're even human, we're like these beings pulsing with light. And Meshuggah once put it this way, incandescent revelations in a world of darkened forms, which we also do the Meshuggah podcast, and I'll tell you more about that later. And so I that's kind of what I did. You can see there in the Richie chat, is like kind of really wind things all the way back, and we talk about health, and we talk about family and nature, and that'll be wonderful to sort of explore the 360 of each of these men, and Gabrielle and everyone supporting and around the band over time. It's a very unscheduled, loose, human kind of chronicle, and you can see by the space of time between the Skinner and Richie chats, it's literally pending on how life happens, and life is often super duper filled with things happening, and I couldn't even really do it even if I wanted to, that whole thing of like regular episodes. It's no. You got to honor life first and foremost. So I guess that also leads me into another thing with maybe there's some questions about like why a dedicated podcast. Well, to one band. Here's the thing. If you follow some of my stuff about Hideo Kojima, I did about 70 or so episodes on Death Stranding, which and his work overall, but primarily focused on Death Stranding. Little side note: there's some interesting, maybe inadvertent, subconscious connections between Gojira and Death Stranding. With here it comes. Ready? Get ready to roll your eyes. Whales and themes of environmentalism and fucking up the planet, and there's a weird shared kind of creative palette there that I maybe down the line will explore, but I figured I'd mention that as I sort of naturally came across it in talking to you guys about it. But yeah, what I did with that show is I sort of made it a low-key. I'm not a very like super forceful dude, but what I do with my shows is I'm sort of gentle but firm in my approach, which is to really just, as I said earlier, go 360 with it, and not just limit yourself to drilling into some of these shows. For example, like there's about 700 podcasts just about Star Wars, and they pass through every tiny minute detail about press releases, and it's just exhausting. Whereas I just looked out on the landscape of this format, which lends itself so well to natural, free-flowing, kind of organic conversational discoveries between kindred people. And I didn't see a Gojira podcast, didn't see Mastodon podcast, Tool podcast, and they're all set up there, all in the making. And it's that, again, third creative component, but if you want to call it like a strange art installation experiment or whatever, but the outcome, the byproduct, is going to be hopefully something that a good majority, hopefully, of people will find interesting and enriching, particularly diving into Christian and Mitch, who aren't as public-facing as Mario and Joe. So if you notice my twangs, it's because I actually lived in Italy for a while, pretty close to France, and like Mario, I had I'm still in touch with him though. Like one of my oldest friends, Mario Marconi. He's rad. Him and his sister Laura. I just only spent about 2 years there. For the rest, I've just been an Australia baby my whole life. But in a very different way to like Australian youth. There's this thing in Europe where you just go out. Like as kids, it was like, I don't know, maybe it was because it was the 90s too. But we just used to go out for ice cream and just like wander around. It's just, I don't know if that's changed or anything, but yeah. So Tangents and Reveries is the name of the game. With the shows, however, we do, you'll see in the Skinner chat as well, is we orbit these subject matters, but we mosey our way along some roughly loose structure. I mean, that goes for if you're like hanging out with friends or whatever, you're not, specifically aiming to be random, is you just find out where things naturally flow. So yeah, to Christian and Mitch will be lovely to speak with. I actually have so many questions for Mitch about mountain biking, which I also love doing. I'm hiking, as you can hear. I like to hike wherever I can. First of all, you might be like, oh yeah, environmentalist. It's like, okay, well, also, it's cheaper, bro. You're not taking the bus, which is, it's also more hygienic, I guess, because public transport, although public transport is amazing, and you can take some measures, and so much better for the environment that way. Definitely advisable over just driving just with one person in a car. So I have a conscientiousness about that. It won't be a dominant component, but it will be a very prominent component of the show, as it is for Gojira, right? So another reason why I do the twang when I say like Gojira is because I'm very close to the Monsterverse as well. I do the Monsterverse podcast. The Monsterverse on Twitter is the handle, and just like that, it's interesting. That's another thus far unexplored and very curious connection. Is there's these two areas of subject matter, which is this French band, very powerful, very spiritual, in some ways very serious about what they do. They're also very playful off stage. It's almost like Tool and Mastodon. They take themselves not so seriously, but they take their work very seriously, which is beautiful. I think that's what sort of connects those three bands in a way. Those three also are definitely in my top 5-10 bands of all time. I tend to allocate that based on the universality, how much of the human experience and just the whatever experience of existence can one band cover. And Gojira set their sights artistically and thematically very universal, but not to the detriment of being able to really emote to the music and ground to it. Like Joe once described, he screams now, where earlier he was sort of screaming as like a jackal, like a young man, like ah. But now he screams as like a protective, like mama bear. Like he's simply shifted gears, but it's still this protective and cathartic experience. We're gonna have close-up analysis stuff on each of the dudes, and parse through interviews and stuff, and see if we can. I don't even think it'll be a doubt. I'm sure we will find. And again, it's a weird way of, for me as well, formalizing this process and sort of bringing you all along on my kind of, research and chronicle. So if that's kind of your vibe, feel free. Yeah, welcome. In that sense, that'll be rad. I can definitely see, for example, with anecdotes is going to be part of it, obviously. Speaking with Christian about the fire incident, maybe down the line, who knows, getting details on that. But again, what details are there? I'm sure he seems to be, I do the whole Myers-Briggs stuff, so we'll probably riff a bit on that, and introversion, extroversion kind of thing. They all seem fairly introverted. Mario is curious because there's elements to him of extroversion, but he seems a pretty inwardly dwelling kind of dude. They all have I'm also fascinated from an anthropological point of view psychological point of view about, and I'll down the line with Mastodon as well, riff with them about this, is the idea of, sharing your life in this way, which is, for most people, the experience of spending your life, sharing it with, like that core group of fellow-aged, fellow like-minded folks, that you just spend giant swaths of time with. It's very unusual. Like you have friend groups in non-band life and non-musician life, but I would definitely say that it's very unique. It's a very unique psychological kind of experience that isn't something that most people do. They have their friend groups, and not to belabor it, but we'll touch on it here and there. I think it might be kind of curious to, analyze, maybe just riff a bit on the energetics of that. It's like, and again, what's weird, like I sort of always see things in order. So the order in which I see things is like, you guys are just orbiting each other's lives as these kind of positivity spreading, it's obviously extremely creative, but I think first and foremost, what typifies Gojira's music is the nature honoring, the deference to nature, and I, for many, many years, over 2 decades, I think, I've had a sense to me of knowing that no matter what kind of trappings and complexities of the human experience, like us in our brains, these evolved sapiens, we get ourselves into trouble, we overanalyze, overthink, and the first alliance, really, literally, our first connection is to just nature, and we are nature. And that's not some hippy-dippy thing. It's actually very solace-bringing, It means we have a pillow behind us at all times. We can just fall back and say, you know what? And that's something I would actually maybe even call Gojira the soundtrack to falling backwards and getting caught, and like letting nature kind of catch you and remind you and cradle you and hold you, and reassure you that what you're going through is a timeless thing. Literally, like, you've heard it, you've seen it, probably read it, the idea of nothing ever being created or destroyed, simply changing shape. So in that sense, makes you and I just facets of the cosmos, like human-shaped lights and human-shaped universes, right? And I since we're in that sort of sphere now of subject matter, I saw a documentary in 2008 which kind of crystallized this for me. I'll see if I can condense it. So basically, they took the genetic kind of the DNA strand, and they looked at the parabola of the DNA strand, and it has a tangible mathematical measurement, like our cell structure. It has a certain measurable arc of some kind. It's like you can measure it. It's pretty densely packed. It's a densely backed spiral. And then they took the electromagnetic signal of a human being experiencing joy versus one experiencing fear. And the fear signal is this very stretched out, drawn out, languid thing, which is almost looks like like this sort of, like a limp spring, a spring that's been taut for too long. Whereas the joy signal is this tightly packed together spiral. And so they laid the two over themselves, the human, the DNA. They laid that Venn diagram style, as I mentioned earlier, over the electromagnetic signal of a human being experiencing joy. And they found they matched perfectly. And so that was a moment for me in 2008 of, I had suspected that there was a reason why, like, our bodies heal, when we get hurt. It's like, why? The body doesn't owe us anything. Why is there this imperative and this, obligation to heal and live in that positivity sphere? What's the, what is there, like, who said we had to do that? And it's like, well, there was never anyone who said anything. It's simply who we are. There was never an order given. It's simply what we evolved into. And sure, we may have our comprehension of all things, restricted by our vessels. I mean, restricted is also framing. You could see it as restricted, or you could see it as the fact that, as far as lemurs who wear clothes go, we're doing pretty well. And we we can conceive of larger things. We might not be able to become the cosmos, and have that omniscience. Shout out to my Bloodborne people, which I do the Bloodborne podcast too. It was actually the first episode of the main show. We dive into that sort of macro micro of the human experiences. What can we theme our lives after, and make it so that at the end of the day and at the end of our lives we've lived something significant and meaningful. And my adage is Honor the Vessel, which is a song actually that I've been slowly tinkering at I do a band, it's Epistep, and very experimental, very kind of almost so experimental, and that's not like to like talk it up or anything. It's just it's in this ether space where it's, especially during COVID, it's tough to kind of get people together and stuff for it. But to honor the vessel is to again do that Gojira-esque thing of just falling back and letting nature catch you, and realizing that there's a pre-programming, there is a ley line, invisible paths, you could even say like fingerprints and handprints. Everywhere you will place your hand is someone's placed their hand there before, thematically. Every experience you'll have is within the realm of what your ancestors have experienced, and there's a solace to that, and everything you are came before and was before and will be again, because we just change shape. So in terms of, just to zoom back out now onto with the upcoming record and everything, the symbols, I want to talk about that because I do symbol craft. I've been immersed in it since 2005. A private, you can call them entanglements, you can call them pattern works, shapescapes. I am fully plugged into the idea of how mankind communicated before language, and the primality, the primordial qualities. They are in that sphere. They've set themselves almost like in the video for Another World. They've almost as researchers, they've just chosen their field, and their field is humanity, but with an emphasis on primal, universal humanity. What connects us beyond language and beyond thought, like these inherent instinctive things, and that's reflected in their song title choices and lyric choices, and definitely what lends them their universality, and to get meta about it, what makes them very, very rewarding to do dives into in this way, which with a podcast really suits that format and rewards closer viewing. I've found that with Dune, I do the Dune podcast stuff, as well as you can just meditate really conversationally with people and with myself on these universals. And the episode with Skinner was called Expressing Universals. I've just retitled it just to his name so people can find the episode sooner. But the reason why you might be like, well, you've certainly orbited this topic of universality a while. It's because it bears orbiting, it bears reiterating. 1000% we'll be looking at band-related anecdotes and even some. I'm not a musician, but I write lyrics, I sing, and I like to dive into the symbolism and the creative kind of, and also I do visual, like album art stuff. I've done some album art for some bands here in Canberra, and I enjoy hearing people talk about the tech side, so I'll never reject that if we go into talking about music craft. But I suppose just over the course of this pretty brief recording, we'll keep this one to maybe to the 30-minute mark or 25-minute mark, to get a sense of what the emphasis will be. For me, clearly, just to sort of state it definitively, certainly it'll be within the creative sphere, but beneath that, and probably primarily, it'll be the human experience aspect, and diving into tangential subject matter, really exploring the humanity, those components where it's like, I don't know, it's maybe why you won't get someone like Loudwire or Metal Sucks or Metal Injection and that's fine. Like, those outlets are very music related, and they have shorter videos, and they have to kind of keep things in that realm of whatever, easy to create, like headlines for or whatever. And just for this though, it'll just be what it'll be. Human beings just riffing and exploring all kinds of tangents, and yeah, kindred spirits vibing. And that'll be rad. Actually, another thing I want to say is we have all the wonderful international dedicated Gojira community folks, so I'll be reaching out to them over time because of the magic of Zoom and the internet. We can connect and sort of swap. It's like, you know, we can have for example, Gojira Poland, who are amazing on Instagram. They are great. I have ancestry in Poland, so that'll be rad. Chat with them. And Gojira Bulgaria also. For me, it's the ones who, it's like when I'm tagging people, is they pop up first. And I'm like, oh, fucking awesome. A Gojira Italia would be great, because, you know, I grew up there a bit, 2 years. But yeah, Gojira France as well would be fucking rad. As a little kind of maybe community question, maybe just also, we've already maybe like slowly melted the ice, no ice breaking or whatever with me. It's just vibe things out. But maybe if you want, in comments or whatever, just, you know, Gojira came up in the 90s, they did. I kind of want you to, I don't know if it's going to be phrased in a question or whatever, but in the 1998 Godzilla movie rather, there was a big French presence with Jean Reno, and like they were not weirdly prominent, but they just were straight up like prominent within the plot of the movie. And there's a weird, it's like a black hole of discussion. It's like no one really talks about that. It's you know, maybe a coincidence or whatever, but that'll be something down the line. I have certain questions, like with the Sword podcast, for example, when I spoke with Brian. Easy mistake, because Richie Beckett, and then you have Brian Ritchie from the Sword. So hey, they also know each other, and they also love each other, by the way. They're bros. I dig that. You know, I have a question for JD for that one, which is simply like, there's a line from the record which is spectres sunk around the sunken city of the Saurians. It's a very evocative and, you know, alliteration tactic lyric, but I kind of want to straight up ask him. It's like, hey, so is that like, that's referring to this one sunken city and this one Warhammer thing, right? And whatever, I'll just like finally be able to feel that. So I actually posted, you might actually be listening to this from the Reddit post, which is if you have a question for the band. So mine to them will be, hey, so what do you reckon of that? Just feel free to riff on whatever. If it's simply a coincidence, we can shut it down, just move on to other things. But if Joe or Christian are like, yeah, you wouldn't believe it, it's like, this is something that happened, and oh, we have a story about that, and this is blah blah blah, like, that could be rad. So again, it won't just all be super heavy existential stuff. It'll be, I like the idea of balance things out, you know. It's what I do with my kind of art, I suppose, if you call them, you know, the shapescapes that I do, is there's a sense of image balancing to them, and it's kind of how I like to do my best, at least. Hopefully I don't go on too many, you don't want the image to be too extreme in any direction, not to the point of being boring or anything, but you want it to be balanced out, and that'll be rad to, whether it's the subject matters we go between, you know, to spend equal time on all of them, or if it's a matter of balancing airwaves between guests and stuff. I want to hear so many stories, really. Like, this is also going to be a wonderful chronicle for that. See what I mean, folks? It's like, look at all the things we can, like, around the band, like, and like just having people come on and be like, hey, I have this whole story about how Gojira helped me, or when I went to this Gojira gig with so-and-so family member, or I met so-and-so there, and hey, my wife and I met there, or my partner and I met there through the band, etc. Like, there's a lot though. So all of these directions, hopefully I've given a bit of a preview of that. So, but anyway, folks, we've got a leaf blower coming up. Don't want to put you through that. Take good care. It's been wonderful connecting with you all, even in this monodirectional way. Looking forward to future entries on this lovely chronicle. So be well, take care, and until next time, bye for now.